Silence is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. Silence is strategy. And after disrespect, it becomes your crown. Let them wonder, let them panic, let them lose sleep over the version of you that said nothing but changed everything. Ladies, we live in a world where everyone wants a reaction, especially when they disrespect you. They're not looking for your understanding. They're craving your breakdown. They want to know they still have power over you. But here's where you flip the game. You don't react. You don't chase. You don't explain. You rise in silence. And that silence, it speaks louder than your scream ever could. Because when you stay silent after disrespect, you're not being weak. You're being unavailable. You're not being scared. You're being elevated, not ignoring it. You're showing them they're not worth your energy. Silence is the loudest boundary. And most people don't know how powerful that is until they use it. In a world that's addicted to noise, to confrontation, to clapping back, your silence becomes a revolution. It becomes your armor, your elegance, your response when the world least expects it. You see, we've been trained to think that boundaries come with big speeches, ultimatums, or angry outbursts. But real boundaries, they're quiet, they're graceful, they don't scream, they simply shut the door and never reopen it. Think of it like this. Imagine you're at a dinner table and someone keeps interrupting you, talking over you, dismissing what you say. You try to assert yourself, raise your voice a little, demand respect, but nothing changes. Now picture this. The next dinner, you don't speak at all. You sit tall, you smile, you observe, and suddenly they notice the absence of your voice. Suddenly they start asking, are you okay? They lean in. They feel the weight of your silence because it is heavier than any shout could ever be. Silence isn't avoidance. It's a conscious choice. When someone crosses the line and you no longer engage, you're not giving up, you're pulling your energy back into your own space. That space, it's sacred. Not everyone deserves access to it. When you go silent after someone disrespects you, you're telling them without words, you don't get to sit at my table anymore. You're not ignoring them, you're prioritizing yourself. Have you ever noticed what happens in relationships, whether romantic, family, or friendship, when someone keeps hurting you and you keep explaining, you keep talking, you keep begging for basic respect? And yet, nothing changes. Because words, when given too freely, lose their value. But when you finally go silent, when you stop justifying, stop messaging, stop replying, that's when they feel it. That's when your silence hits like thunder in a quiet room. It shakes them. Because now, they don't know what you're thinking. And that mystery, that unpredictability, it's terrifying to those who thought they had control over you. There's a woman I know who kept tolerating her boyfriend's passive aggression. He would make jokes at her expense in front of friends, call her too sensitive when she asked for kindness. For months she kept arguing back, explaining, fighting. Nothing changed. Until one night, she didn't say anything. She laughed lightly, stood up, picked up her purse and walked out. No yelling, no speech, no storm, just silence. He called her 20 times that night, not because he missed the fight, but because her silence screamed that she was done, that she respected herself more than she wanted to be right. Silence is powerful in the workplace too. That moment when your idea gets dismissed in a meeting, but someone else repeats it and gets applause. Instead of reacting with anger, stay silent, then show them an execution. Let your work speak. Because silence followed by action is sharper than any words you can throw. Or take family dynamics. Maybe you're constantly the emotional punching bag. You speak up, they twist it. You cry, they mock it. Then one day you stop responding to their guilt trips. You stop answering calls. You stop explaining why you're distant. You protect your peace and you don't let them know what you're thinking. That's when they panic. Because the one they thought would never stop giving finally closed the door. In love, in friendship, at work, even with strangers online. You don't owe a reaction to everyone who disrespects you. Your silence tells them, I see what you did. I value myself too much to lower my vibration and dance in the chaos you created. Disrespect is not an invitation for conversation. It's not a cue for you to explain your worth. It's not a door you're supposed to walk through and start negotiating your value. When someone disrespects you, they're not seeking understanding. They're seeking dominance. They're testing how much of yourself you're willing to shrink. And the moment you engage in dialogue with someone who has already decided to belittle you, you're not protecting your worth, you're offering it up on a platter. Imagine you're standing at a store counter and the person behind you pushes ahead and cuts in line. You turn and say, "Excuse me," and they look at you with that mocking smirk and say, "Relax, it's not that serious." Now, here's the trap. You start explaining, defending, proving you were in line first. You give them your energy, your peace, your moment, and they don't care. Because disrespect doesn't want logic, it wants reaction. Instead, when you look them in the eye, say nothing, and step aside with grace, you take your power back. You don't need to argue to win. Sometimes silence and detachment is the victory. A woman once shared how she stayed in a toxic relationship far too long because every time he crossed a line, she initiated a conversation. She hoped he'd listen, change, grow, but each time he manipulated the narrative, made her feel dramatic, made her feel guilty for bringing it up, and every conversation ended with her apologizing for reacting, not him apologizing for the disrespect. Until one day she learned, disrespect isn't a misunderstanding, it's a message. And sometimes the smartest response is no response at all. You know those friends who throw sly insults wrapped in sarcasm? Who say things like, "Oh, you're wearing that today," or "I didn't think you were smart enough to get that job." And then they laugh it off with a, "I'm just joking, chill." That's not humor. That's disguised disrespect. And the mistake we make is trying to talk it out. We try to clarify, to make them understand how it hurts. But the truth is, they already know. They just don't care. Your hurt is their entertainment. And when you treat their disrespect like a conversation starter, you give them front row tickets to your emotional downfall. In the workplace, you might have a boss or a colleague who constantly undermines your ideas, dismisses your contributions, or talks down to you. Your instinct may be to explain your expertise, to prove your value, to engage in a back and forth just to be seen. But here's the game changer. You don't argue with someone who's already decided they're above you. You rise above them with results. You don't explain your worth to someone who's committed to ignoring it. You demonstrate it with unshakable silence and relentless delivery. And in family situations where elders may throw around disrespect masked as tradition or tough love, it's tempting to argue, to beg for understanding, to try and make them see your side. But if someone invalidates your dreams, mocks your path, or constantly compares you to others, what they want is not your voice. They want your submission. Don't give it. Disrespect dressed as concern is still disrespect. And you're not obligated to debate your destiny with anyone who doesn't believe in it. Even online. A stranger behind a screen throws hate at your post, mocks your appearance, questions your intelligence. Your first instinct? To reply, to defend. But here's the thing, not everyone deserves your energy. When you respond to disrespect with conversation, you turn a moment into a relation. Don't leave them on red, let them drown in their own noise. You are not required to unpack your soul in front of people who stomp on it like it's a doormat. You are not a courtroom. You don't need to plead your case. Let disrespect be the final word, not the beginning of a dialogue. Their apology shouldn't be your healing. Because if you're waiting for someone else's regret to set you free, you're handing over your peace to the very person who shattered it. Healing is not a gift someone else can give you. It's a power you take back for yourself. An apology might soothe your ego, yes. It might feel good to hear, "I'm sorry." But don't confuse closure with healing. Closure is a story ending. Healing is you becoming the author again. Imagine a woman who was left heartbroken by a partner who cheated on her. He disappeared, no explanation, no goodbye, just silence. And for months she couldn't move on. Not because she still loved him, but because she was waiting for that apology, that text, that phone call. She told herself, if he just says sorry, I'll finally feel okay. But here's the truth. Even if that sorry came, it wouldn't erase the nights she cried, the way she doubted her worth, or the pain she carried in her chest. Because the wound wasn't his to close. It was hers to clean. Apologies are nice, but they are not medicine. They are not justice. And they are certainly not a substitute for self-worth. Have you ever had a parent who never apologized for the emotional damage they caused? The criticism, the neglect, the conditional love. And you think one day they'll say they're proud. One day they'll realize how they made me feel. But sometimes that day never comes. Sometimes they never change. And here's where your power begins. You stop needing their words to validate your pain. You give yourself the apology you never got. You heal by saying, I deserved better. And then living like it. A friend once told me about how her best friend betrayed her, shared secrets, backstabbed her, and then played the victim. She waited for months for her friend to realize what she had done. She rehearsed in her head what she would say when the apology finally came. But it didn't. And one day, instead of waiting, she wrote a letter, not to her friend but to herself. She forgave herself for staying too long, for trusting too much, for not seeing the red flags. And in that moment, she understood. Her healing didn't need an apology. It needed honesty. It needed boundaries. It needed her. Some people don't apologize because they don't feel guilty. Others don't because they lack the courage to face what they've done. And some don't even realize the damage they caused. But none of that should hold your life hostage. You don't wait for the person who cut you to also be the one to sew you back together. You learn to stitch your own wounds, even if your hands are shaking. Let's talk about work. Maybe a boss took credit for your idea. Maybe a colleague threw you under the bus. And you keep telling yourself, they'll admit it eventually. They'll come around and say they were wrong. But the truth is, they might not. They might sleep just fine at night. But should their lack of remorse keep you stuck? No. You grow, you rise. You let your brilliance shine in places where credit is given, not stolen. You heal by continuing to build what they tried to break. Even in romantic relationships, when someone ghosts you, gaslights you, manipulates you, and then they come back with that classic line, I didn't know how to love you. That may sound like an apology, but it's not your healing, because the real healing started when you stopped waiting for them to love you right and started loving yourself better. So many of us walk through life collecting apologies like keys, thinking they'll unlock our next chapter, but they don't. What unlocks your future is the moment you realize you don't need to hear, I'm sorry, to move forward. You just need to say to yourself, I've had enough. I deserve more, and I'm not waiting anymore. Energy is expensive. Don't spend it proving your point. Because every time you try to convince someone who has already decided not to understand you, you drain your peace to fill their ignorance. You burn your inner light to brighten a room that was never meant for you. Your energy is your currency, your sacred fire, and not everyone deserves to sit at the table where it burns. You don't owe your truth to those who mock it. You don't owe your perspective to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You owe yourself the discipline to walk away, without speaking a single word when someone tries to pull you into a battle that insults your intelligence. There's a woman who spent years in a toxic friendship. Every time she spoke her truth, her friend twisted it into a debate. You're too sensitive. You always take things the wrong way. So she'd spend hours, sometimes days, explaining herself, trying to be understood, trying to show where she came from. But it was like yelling into the wind. One day she stopped. Not because she gave up, but because she realized she was bankrupting her soul to fund someone else's blindness. That moment of silence, that was her power. Because real peace is when you no longer crave to be understood by those who never tried. You see this in relationships too. A man breaks your heart, lies to you, and then flips the blame. You're just overreacting. You're too emotional. And you try, typing long messages, writing paragraphs to explain your side, pouring out every drop of your pain, hoping he'll finally see what he did. But he doesn't. Not because you didn't explain it well enough, but because he never planned to listen. That moment when you finally delete the message before sending it, that's not weakness. That's your evolution. That's you realizing your voice deserves better ears. Think about social media. Someone comments something rude under your post. Maybe they call you fake, maybe they question your talent, maybe they just throw shade for no reason. And your first instinct? Clap back, drop a savage reply, prove them wrong. But here's the truth, when you argue with a fool, people watching don't know who's who. You lower your frequency just to meet them at theirs. That's like taking off your crown just to throw it at someone crawling. No, royalty doesn't respond to peasants screaming from the shadows. Walk away, block, breathe. Your energy isn't a debate stage, even in family. When your dreams don't align with their expectations. When they say, that's not realistic, or why can't you be like your cousin? You feel the urge to fight. To show them why your path matters. But you don't have to turn every dinner table into a courtroom. Let your success speak. Let your glow be the argument. Let your silence echo with a confidence that says, you'll see in time. But I'm not waiting for your approval to rise. At work, you give your best, you go above and beyond. But someone still questions your ability. A co-worker throws shade. A boss doesn't acknowledge your effort. You feel tempted to prove it, to explain why you're valuable. But you weren't hired to defend yourself, you were hired to deliver. So do just that. Let your results be louder than your defense. Proving yourself to people who are determined not to see your light only dims it. And your brilliance was never meant to be dimmed. There's a moment in everyone's life where you have to choose. Spend your energy explaining your worth to people who don't care. Or protect your energy like the treasure it is. Speak when it adds peace. Stay silent when it protects power. Not everything requires a reply. Not every opinion deserves an answer. Some people are not arguing because they're curious. They're arguing to drain you, to control you, to reduce you. And every second you spend proving your point is a second you delay your purpose. Your silence activates their insecurity. Because people who thrive on control, chaos, and validation are terrified of one thing: being ignored. See, silence isn't empty. It's loaded. It's a mirror. And when you stop reacting, they're forced to look at themselves. No distractions, no arguments, just the haunting sound of their own behavior echoing back to them. And trust me, for someone who feeds off your energy, your silence is louder than a scream. It's the one thing they can't manipulate, can't twist, and can't predict. It's power without performance. And when you master it, you no longer chase respect, you command it without saying a word. There was a woman whose partner constantly disrespected her. Snide remarks, backhanded compliments, and public humiliation masked as jokes. She'd argue, cry, try to explain how it made her feel. He'd roll his eyes, accuse her of being dramatic, and she'd fall into the same exhausting loop. Defend, break down, forgive. One day, she didn't reply. She just looked at him and walked away. No tears, no reaction. That night, he couldn't sleep. Why? Because her silence said what words never could. You don't have access to me anymore. When you stop defending yourself, it unsettles those who were counting on your emotional response to feel powerful. It makes them wonder, did I go too far, or worse, do I not matter anymore? That's the thing. Some people don't want you to heal. They want you to keep bleeding in front of them so they feel needed. But when you go silent, when you protect your peace, they feel irrelevant. And that's the kind of insecurity they can't hide. Imagine you've been constantly overlooked at work, ideas stolen in meetings, contributions dismissed, and passive-aggressive emails flying around. You used to confront them, trying to make them acknowledge you. But now, you just show up, slay your projects, and move in silence. Suddenly they start asking, is she planning to leave? Why is she so calm? Because silence signals strategy. And strategic people are the most dangerous kind. When you stop explaining yourself, people start speculating. And their imagination always hits harder than your explanation ever could. Take friendships too. Maybe someone close to you began treating you like an option, only calling when they needed something, ghosting you when you needed them. You finally stop replying. No announcement, no drama, just distance. And they start posting vague quotes, sending hey stranger texts, trying to bait you into a conversation. But you've moved on. That's silence. That's not pettiness. That's wisdom. Because once you realize someone doesn't value your presence, your absence becomes your response. and it rattles them. Even on social media, silence shakes the ground. Let's say someone throws shade at you online, maybe an ex, maybe a jealous peer. They expect you to clap back. But you don't. You keep living, you keep glowing. That silence, it becomes a storm inside their own mind. Because now they're not just battling you, they're battling the thought. Maybe I was never that important to them. Silence is not weakness, it's a tactic, a boundary, a message wrapped in mystery. And it only unnerves those who once believed they had control over your emotions. You know why? Because your reaction fed their relevance. Your argument fed their ego. But your silence, it starves them. You walk away and they're left screaming in the dark, trying to find an echo that never comes back. There's power in choosing not to respond. Not because you don't have something to say, but because what you could say isn't worth the energy it would cost. And when you choose that kind of peace, people either step up or fade out. Either way, your silence becomes the turning point. Not for them to return, but for you to rise. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. Every time you let something slide, every time you swallow your pain just to keep the peace, you're silently giving permission. Permission to disrespect you, permission to ignore your worth. And eventually what you allow becomes your identity in their eyes. You don't need to scream, fight, or beg. You just need to stop accepting less than what you deserve, because the moment you accept disrespect once, you sign a silent contract saying, this is okay. And it's not. It never was. There was a girl who stayed in a relationship far longer than she should have. Her boyfriend would cancel plans last minute, flirt with others in front of her, and make jokes that chipped away at her confidence. And she'd laugh it off, thinking, if I react, he'll say I'm insecure. So she tolerated for weeks, then months, until one day she caught herself apologizing for his bad behavior. That's when it hit her. I've trained him to believe I'll accept this. And from that day, she stopped explaining and started exiting. That decision wasn't loud, it was quiet, but it echoed. Because the minute she raised her standard, she raised her self-worth. In friendships too, when someone keeps showing up late, cancelling plans, always talking about themselves and never asking about you, it's not just how they are, it's what you've allowed. You answer every text. You keep showing up, you keep forgiving, and they keep taking, because you're teaching them. I will always be here, even when you're not. But when you stop overgiving, when you let the silence speak louder than the chase, that's when they start realizing what they had. Not because they suddenly care more, but because your absence disrupted their pattern of taking you for granted. Even at work, you show up early, stay late, take on extra tasks, but you're never promoted, never appreciated. Why? Because you trained them to expect excellence without acknowledgement. You never said no, never asked for more. You tolerated the minimum and delivered the maximum. Until you decide to speak up or walk away, they'll continue treating you like a machine, not a human. Your tolerance became their blueprint. I met a woman who had a toxic mother-in-law. Constant criticism, passive-aggressive comments, subtle insults at every family event. And for years she smiled through it. For the sake of the marriage, for the sake of peace. But one day she looked in the mirror and realized, this isn't peace. This is self-abandonment in disguise. So at the next family dinner, she didn't argue and she didn't explode. She just excused herself and never went back to that dynamic. Not out of hate, out of healing. Because when you stop tolerating disrespect, you start teaching others how to love you properly. You don't earn respect by being the most agreeable. You earn it by drawing the line clearly, firmly, and unapologetically. People don't just treat you a certain way randomly. They test. And your response becomes their green light or red flag. So the next time someone jokes about something that hurts, don't laugh. The next time they push your boundary, don't bend. Because if you tolerate it once, they'll believe it's allowed forever. You deserve a love that doesn't make you shrink. A friendship that doesn't drain you. A job that doesn't rob you of joy. But to have that, you must first teach the world what is and isn't acceptable in your presence. And that lesson begins not with them, but with you. The standards you set, the boundaries you enforce, the version of yourself you choose not to abandon, even when it's inconvenient. Because every time you tolerate disrespect, you give away a piece of your power, and eventually the world mirrors what you believe you deserve. Silent exits are forever remembered, because silence holds a weight that words never could. When you leave without a warning, without a dramatic goodbye, without a final message, as calm, collected, and completely done, it lingers. It haunts. It becomes the question they never get an answer to. It's not closure, it's consequence. And the human mind struggles most with what it cannot understand. When someone walks away silently, they don't just leave the room, they leave an echo that stays behind long after they're gone. Think of that friend who used to be your entire world. Daily texts, late night talks, memories stacked like books on a shelf. But somewhere along the way, they stopped showing up. Stop being loyal, stop being real. And instead of fighting for a place in their life, you just stop responding. No explanation, no rage, no farewell post, just silence. And to this day, they scroll through your feed, waiting for a sign, wondering, what happened? That's the power of a silent exit. It doesn't need to be loud to be unforgettable. Or that relationship, the one you fought so hard to save. You forgave the lies, you tolerated the inconsistency, you lowered your standards just to feel love for a few stolen moments until you couldn't anymore. One day, you didn't cry, you didn't scream, you just walked away, blocked, deleted, moved on. And that person, they still stalk your stories, still try to recreate your energy in others. Because you didn't give them the satisfaction of closure. You gave them the sting of absence. And that burns longer than anger ever could. In the workplace too, there are employees who go above and beyond, overlooked and undervalued. One woman I knew was the heart of her team, always present, always delivering, always dependable. Yet promotions passed her, credit was stolen, and her ideas were dismissed. So she updated her resume, accepted another offer, and left her resignation on her manager's desk without a word. So she didn't explain, she didn't vent, she didn't plead. And after she left, the whole department felt her absence like a power outage. Silent exits don't make noise. They make impact. Even in family dynamics, silent exits cut the deepest. The child who's always misunderstood, gaslighted, manipulated, finally chooses peace over connection. They stop attending the dinners, stop returning the calls, not out of hate, but out of self-preservation. And suddenly, the family that once dismissed their pain starts asking, why don't they come around anymore? But they never get an answer. Because sometimes the only apology you ever receive is the silence after your absence is felt. You see, a loud exit gives people the chance to twist your words, defend their actions, and justify the disrespect. But a silent exit? It leaves no room for debate. No argument, no defense, just a void. And people fill that void with their own reflection. Your silence forces them to sit with themselves, to ask the questions they ignored when you were around. And that's why it's remembered, because it's unfinished. There's something poetic about choosing dignity over drama, about leaving with your head held high instead of screaming just to be heard. The most powerful sentence you'll ever speak is the one you never say. Because when you stop fighting for attention, stop begging for decency, and just leave, you teach them what losing access to you really feels like. And they never forget it. Silent exits aren't weakness, they're wisdom. They say, I loved you, but I love me more. They say, I cared enough to stay, but I grew enough to go. They don't need to prove anything. They don't need to announce. They simply happen. And the silence that follows, that's not emptiness. That's respect echoing in the absence. And now, breathe. You've heard it all. You've felt it all. The silence, the strength, the storm within that doesn't scream, but shakes the world in stillness. This isn't just about staying quiet after disrespect. It's about